Compared to the TOS and the TNG movies, Clay, this flew by. We're done with the Kelvin movies after this is done. There's only 3 of them, but for some reason I feel like we're barely embedded into this universe or something like that. I feel like I walked away with not a great sense of what the Kelvin universe was all about, even though I thought I had a pretty good sense of what the 10 TOS and TNG movies gave me for a sense of feeling.
You do have 10 movies and 10 seasons of television.
So many. Yeah, this is a little bit different though. There's only the 3, and now we're going to be talking about Star Trek Beyond for this one. But yeah, I just thought it was funny. Like I feel like we didn't even record these quicker than normal, but it's over very quickly. Before it even feels like it begins, it's over.
Well, you know what's funny about this, the Kelvin movies, this one especially, is it kind of suffers from Daniel Craig, or I should say latter years James Bond disease, where it's like, for whatever reason, they very quickly go to the main character wants to quit. And I feel like that gives you, it sort of
after
takes
just
away,
starting, like he starts and then he quits in the next movie.
Yeah, and it kind of takes away this sense of like the world that you should be seeing. Yeah, because James Bond is supposed to be this spy who's going on adventures and stuff, but in this first movie or the second movie, he's like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And so every movie turns into him being like, I don't want to do this, but reluctantly I will for the sake of the country or whatever.
It's really just the era that they're made in, right? Like the lack of institutional trust is now the big thing that you put into these movies. So same with Star Trek. They're dealing with like a corrupt organization or something that does not engender them to stay involved in it.
Yeah, even the second one of the Kelvin movies, the head of Starfleet is a fucking bad guy. Yeah. And it's like, well, you can't trust them. It's like, well, okay, well, that's sort of the linchpin of the whole concept. Then undermining that isn't really doing you a lot of favors after one movie.
Yeah, cuts it short. We're talking about Star Trek Beyond. I'm going to take a break. We'll play some music, and then we'll come back and get right into it. Okay, so Star Trek Beyond is the 3rd of the Kelvin movies. It's the 13th of 13 Star Trek films at this point in time when we're recording this in 2020. Written by Simon Pegg and Doug Young, directed by Justin Lin, produced by J.J. Abrams, Ryan Burke, Jeffrey Chernov, David Ellison, and Roberto Ursi. In this movie, after stopping off at Starbase Yorktown, a remote outpost on the fringes of Federation space, the USS Enterprise, halfway into its 5-year mission, is destroyed by a powerful, unstoppable wave of unknown aliens. With the crew stranded on an unknown planet with no apparent means of rescue, they find themselves in conflict with a new ruthless enemy who has a well-earned hatred of the Federation and what it stands for. Boy, the Memory Alpha blurbs for the movies really struggle to get all the information in within as few sentences as possible.
At least this one, and I think this is a good place to start about why I like this one so much more than the last one, is it's fairly straightforward. Like you hit like a couple beats in that breakdown, and you more or less get what's going on. Whereas the last one, we had an entire sub conversation on Discord about what the plot actually was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's I think I'd never seen this one before. I know you had seen it. This is like clearly the best of the Kelvin movies, I think. Yeah,
right.
Like in no uncertain terms, and a lot of it.
And nobody talks about it. It's like it came out. It kind of was people forgot about it.
They lost money.
People who did see it didn't particularly like it. And I remember watching it going like, this is the best one by far.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's damning with faint praise. Like, I don't think this is a blockbuster blow me away movie, but it's by far the most competent out of all the movies that they put out. I think this movie, in virtually all technical aspects, is better than the Abrams 2 that he did. Yeah, it's better directed, the script is better, the acting is better, the scenes that you get are better, the visuals are better, in my opinion.
The use of the, reluctantly, I have to say, the use of the Beastie Boys is better.
Yeah, like it actually works. When you see the trailer, you think it's just kind of a hokey idea, but it actually ties into the story really well done. Yeah, it's really interesting.
As you would think stuff like that should, instead of just using it as a hip needle drop.
Right, a trailer track. Yeah. Yeah, Sabotage is, and then maybe it's a little heavy-handed in that the name of the song is Sabotage, and what they're doing is sabotaging the droid, the little swarm army or whatever. But yeah, I was really impressed with this one. I thought that I was sort of confused that this, not really confused, but like to me, if you were to redo this feels like it's the second movie of the trilogy for them. You know, they blew up the Enterprise or whatever, but that seems just like the stakes that have to be that case. But I felt like this one, to me, just the way it starts off and everything, and the way that the tone of the movie is and the way that the scenes are set up, is more about like where the characters have kind of settled into after the first movie with each other, and they know each other, they have conversations with each other. This movie blew me away because it just showed and highlighted how few good character interactions there are in the first two Abrams movies. Yep. The characters don't talk to each other at all.
Right.
And I guess that's an Abrams thing, because everyone's complaining about the Star Wars movies. He separated the main characters, which is kind of unfair because I think they do that in Empire too. It's not like it's an unheard of thing in Star Wars, but Abrams seems to really like separating cast members from like characters in the story from each other.
Starfleet Command sent me your application for the Vice Admiral position here at this installation.
Yes, ma'am. If I may, I would recommend Commander Spock replace me as captain of the Enterprise. He is an exemplary Starfleet officer. He'd make a great captain.
It isn't uncommon, you know, even for a captain, to want to leave. There's no relative direction in the vastness of space. There's only yourself, your ship, your crew. It's easier than you think to get lost.
It's not
I'll bring it up with the General Council. We'll discuss it when you return.
Ma'am.
Yeah, I always found that to be a little unfair because the first one is, you know, the story is about getting them together, so it's going to take a longer time to coalesce everybody.
You're talking about Star Wars here, just instead you're not talking about
Star Trek too.
Oh, I mean, Star Trek too. Okay.
You know, both of them, you can look at them and say the same thing, where they're about putting your team together. Essentially, you know, the first Abrams Star Trek ends or drives towards everybody being on the Enterprise at the same time. The second one is, I don't think they split. They don't really split them up that much. The only person they split up out of the group is Scotty in the second one.
Yeah, well, I feel that what they do is, because the action is so intense and nonstop, they don't really have character interactions as much as telling each other what's going on.
Yeah, that I will 100% agree with. Because in this one, if you really want to look at the three of them, they split people up more in this one than they do the first two. Yes. Because they blow the ship up and then they scatter everybody across the planet.
But they pair them with other. Like they just cut down on, it's not a big group scene, it's just one-on-one scenes with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think the criticism for Abrams is less that he splits the characters up, because I think that's just a necessity of storytelling to a certain point. And it should be what you're saying, which is he's not really giving them room to breathe and interact with each other, because everything moves so fast and everything is so, it's, you know, you're pushing everybody in different directions. So while they are on the same ship, they're just sort of, you know, barking at each other as they pass in the hallway.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, you actually get scenes. You get room to breathe. The recontextualizing of Kirk's birthday in relationship to his dad dying is, I think that scene's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. That also feels very much, that's almost like a holdover from The Cage, where the captain and the doctor are drinking in the Cage pilot together. That felt very appropriate, that they, if they're redoing this era of Star Trek, that those characters drink together. It seems very much a TOS idea.
Right, yeah. And it's just smart in the way that they split them up in like the groups that they put together. Like putting Spock and McCoy together is fantastic. I do wonder if, I might be making this up, but I have this memory that Carl Urban almost didn't do this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had that in the back of my mind as I was watching this, and I was going, there's a lot of bones in this movie. Like, he has a lot to do, much more than the first two. And I wonder if that was kind of, you know, part of getting him back, if that actually was the case. But
yeah, I think they only booked Pine and what's Spock's actor?
Zachary Quinto.
Yeah, Zachary Quinto. I think they were the only ones with 4 film contracts. Is the difference?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but obviously they treated McCoy like a character who doesn't have a returning contract in the first 2 movies, and we're just say quips. And he works here, and he plays off of Spock really well. That's a pairing that you've kind of been dying to see. I think Kirk and Chekhov work pretty well together in terms of like seasoned ability. And then for comic relief, you pair Scotty with Jayla, the new alien, and just have kind of like comic scenes between the two of them.
Yeah, and I think Jayla's a great character. I think she's a great addition. I think that I appreciate. So again, going back to what we were talking about in the first 2 about like why don't they push it further? I'm kind of impressed that in this movie they went with a wholly original villain instead of kind of panicking, and if you want to call it that, and doing something like really out there. And maybe it's a pendulum swing after the second one. They didn't want to do that again. But like if you've got this third movie in this big franchise, and I think it was like the 50th anniversary when it came out, I think.
Yeah, they didn't release it to coincide with the 50th anniversary, which they were saying was a mistake because they released it right in the height of summer blockbuster season, and it just got crushed by everything else that was going on around it. And the 50th anniversary of TOS is later in the year. It's a fall. I think it's September something. And I think it would have had more space at the theaters, and it would have gotten some good marketing out of the fact of like celebrate the 50th with this new movie. Right.
That's really dumb that they did.
Which is what Skyfall did. Apparently, it released on the 50th anniversary of Bond, and they played that up quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a layup. Whoever's in charge of that marketing should have been fired.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's no good.
But yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't do something a little bit more swing for the fence as far as like, like I said, bring in the Borg or something, something out there that's going to really grab people's attention. They made this kind of quieter, if you want to use that term, story involving a wholly new villain that works on Star Trek Enterprise continuity.
Yeah.
So it's like it's going in the face of the last one by expressly saying that this happens in continuity with all the other stuff. And pulling it off. And they that's not to say it's not full of action, because it is. And I think the action in this is by far the best action in any of the 3 movies.
Yes, by far. Justin Lin is the Fast and the Furious director, and he's just a better action director than Abrams is.
And it's more inventive. Like every action scene is different from the next one. The only one that's a little bit meh to me is probably the motorcycle rescue. That one's, whatever. But like as far as those buzzsaw things cutting the Enterprise in half, or the stuff that they're doing with orientation as the ship is crashing, or flipping over, it's amazing. And I mean that final fight scene with Diana Krall in the gravity well thing at the end, that's really cool. It's a really inventive, well done movie.
Yeah, it's got a lot.
The costumes look great too. They redesigned the uniforms a little bit, and I think they look fantastic.
They do. They look nice, and they wear their jackets when they're down on the planet. Actually, it's a nice mix of two things. But the Enterprise uniforms do look more like throwback uniforms. They look nice. They're particularly bright when they capture them all and they bring them to Krall's planet, and they're sort of marching on like that barren, icy rockiness. The colors really pop against it. It's very nice looking.
What's actually interesting to me is they are the regular, like on the ship uniforms, the yellow, blue, and reds are like 2 clicks closer to Discovery, but they're not as overly designed as Discovery.
Yeah.
Because they're still like they're more than just like the t-shirts they're wearing in the first 2 movies, but they're not quite the what if we turn the big yellow shirt into like a really tight yellow jacket.
Right. Yeah.
And that's as someone who likes the Discovery redesign of the TOS stuff. I think that looks good, but I actually think this is probably the best compromise.
Yes, if you're considering original canon, I think, because these are just like sort of well-fitted long sleeve t-shirts that they're wearing.
Right. Right. And they look a little bit nicer than the ones they wore in the last one, which were just you know, they were yellow shirts with little star insignias printed all over them.
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the most important things about the Star Trek movies is that they suffer when they have bad villains in them, unsurprisingly. I think a lot of movies suffer when they have bad villains in them or bad antagonists or something. I think that Nero was awful. I think that Khan was not nearly as bad as Nero, but was not really anything impressive in that one, and Admiral Marcus kind of falls into that bucket. What'd you think of Krall?
I think I like him, but I think he turns into a Star Trek villain too late. Like as I was watching this, I was thinking about what he was and what he stands for, and I really like that, and I think he is very much a Star Trek villain in the whole of what he is. But I feel like if this was the show, you would have gotten at least one good scene where Krall has like a dialogue sequence with Kirk where they kind of hash out their differences of like ethos and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the twist comes a little too late, where I wish you had a little bit more time to sit with exactly what his deal is, because I think him being this soldier who predates the Federation, so he's someone who's a warrior and had to deal with this peacetime thing, and it doesn't go right for him, and so he ends up railing against it. I think that's great. That's a great Star Trek villain. It feels like he could be even like a Deep Space Nine character.
Yeah.
But for the first bunch of it is mainly like alien monster needs to get the magic gun.
Yeah. Shoot people with it.
Yeah. So I wish they gave him a little bit more to do a little bit earlier.
If it was an episode, his reveal would have been like the second act information break. They go like you know, they show him like, oh, this is this guy, and then you have a couple acts of dealing with him and sort of being aware of him.
Having seen it before, I knew what the twist was, and I didn't realize how late it was in the movie.
Right,
it's like right before they catch him, and in my head,
it's
I
like
was
20 minutes from the end. It's right at the end of the movie. Yeah,
yeah. As in my head, I remembered it being a lot sooner. Like once everybody gets onto the Franklin, I thought that's when that stuff started coming out. I didn't realize it was literally after they crashed at Yorktown.
Krall's interesting because he is kind of two villains. I think on one level, the reason he works for me maybe more in the first half of the movie is because they do a better job of writing him in a way that Khan probably should have been written, which is that Krall is a dangerous villain. There's he literally destroys the Enterprise. They have technology that they're unaware of. He seems intimidating. He's doing like a Shang Tsung soul sucking maneuver on people. Mm-hmm. And he comes across as threatening and in control and dangerous, and that our heroes are at a disadvantage. And I think that he's the only villain that they really did. Like, I didn't even really feel that way with Nero. Nero is just too abstract of a threat. I like the twist. But he's got
that giant spike that he stabs people with.
Right, he's got his trident.
He yells really loud before he does it.
And Krall is better framed in the first half. The twist would have been good, but I agree with you that it happens too late. The biggest problem for me that it happening that late is that they have to give so much exposition that it just becomes very bad writing at that point, where you have to have this character only talking about what his goals are and things like that. And I would have liked that to have happened earlier. And if it had happened earlier, he would have been a pretty strong villain overall, I think, because he would have had the best of both worlds in that case, where he is in control of the action in the first act, and then you can get into sort of his motivations in a better way in the second half.
Do you wish that there was a scene where Kirk introduces himself to Krall, and Krall's like, "Hi, James, I'm Krall."
I'm Balthazar. Nice to meet you. What's the only real question I had about this movie was there's no explanation for why they look this way, right? It's just a byproduct of the process of soul sucking.
Yeah. My understanding of it is that whatever the technology or the process is that is extending his life turned him into that monster.
Yeah.
and the more monstered out he gets, the more like monstrous he gets.
Yes.
So he needs to like suck souls to pull it back in. But aside from that, they don't really go into it, and I don't really think they need to.
Yeah, it's not. It's all for the disguise of what's going on, I guess. And the only other thing that really confused me is that when I was seeing the ships, I was like, wow, there's a lot of these guys everywhere. They're all flying the ships. They reveal that it's just drone activity that's flying most of the ships. But I feel you don't get that reveal until very late in it. Like, no one's ever surprised that they... Like, why did they beam into one of the ships that has a guy in it? It seems like your odds of doing that are so low.
Oh, no, I think the idea is that all of the guys are drones.
Oh, all of the soldiers are drones, too.
I think so, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. And so that's why the only ones that aren't that way don't have helmets on. Those are the original three. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is.
I don't know if it's a weakness of script, but that never feels like it's illuminated, really. Like the fact is that there's only 3 Franklin survivors by the end of it. It never really lands on screen, except for the fact that you're like, oh, he must be dealing with his lieutenant and that girl because they're the characters who need their helmets off to see who they are.
I don't think the other guy. I think Krall is the only Franklin survivor.
No, there's 3.
I think the other 2 guys are part of whatever that race is that gave him the power to become younger or stay alive. Are they not?
I don't. My understanding was that of the original Franklin, there's only the 3 of them, which are the girl that sort of tricks them at the beginning, his lieutenant who fights Jayla, and then Krall.
Oh, I never even considered that the girl was one of the crew members, because the reason I'm saying that I think it's only Krall is because in his captain's log, he when he's still a human, he says he's the only one left.
Before his sudden disappearance, he'd been the captain of the Franklin. He was declared missing in action. He crashed onto this planet, which had drone equipment and other technology behind. Edison and at least 2 of his crewmates used the remains of the technology to prolong their lives.
Okay, I mean, I would debate that, but I'll assume that that's the case.
Yeah, the wording of it makes it just sound like because you see those 2 characters without their helmets on, those are probably Krall's. I think Memory Alpha is just making the assumption those are 2 of the crewmates who landed.
That's what I think it's doing as well, and I don't know if that's actually what it is, but for sake of argument, let's say sure.
Sure, yeah. I'm only mentioning it because I didn't realize that all the other guys were drone creatures because I just never made that connection. And I was surprised when they make the reveal of there only being so few of them at the end. It was surprising to me because I was wondering how they were marching around in this prison camp without being seen by the billion guards that seemed to be flying the ships around and stuff like that.
Yeah. You know what else I really liked? I thought that was done really inventively was the Universal Translator.
Yes, where it overdubs really cool. What they're talking about.
Yeah, I thought that was really nice. They do the modern. I guess you could call it a modern movie thing. Yeah, I would say that it is because they do it all the time in the Avengers movies, which I think is just hilarious. But it's this the assuming everybody has an open channel communicator on them at the height of battle,
right?
Because you've got Kirk climbing up into this thing to fight Krall, and you've got Scotty back at the command center, and you've got Bones in his ship there, and they're all seem to be patched in on the same frequency, even though expressly in this movie they used to flip open communicators.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever. Yeah, I mean, they have to talk to each other. Let's just assume that they have communicators on or something.
Hands-free.
I remember in, I think it was Endgame, when everybody comes out of the thing at the end and they're fighting Thanos, and they all show up all patched into whatever radio Captain America has in his ear.
Yes.
Because like from that point on, they're just talking and they're in the middle of this battle at different points and they can all hear each other.
Yep.
So I guess they just, before they came back from, dust, maybe part of what Hulk said is make sure everybody has an earpiece in.
I also think that just in terms of being better craft work, this story actually does try to stick to a theme fairly well. It has a theme. I wouldn't say that it does great guns on it, mostly because Krall is given such short shrift. But the idea is that unity is more important than disunity, I suppose, or sort of antagonism towards each other. And I think that they do some interesting work of Kirk wanting to quit in the middle of his 5-year mission. They have a good line about there's no relative direction in the vastness of space, which is kind of the point of the movie, I guess, is that Kirk is trying to find his way. I think that the theme doesn't perfectly tie in with the characters, I don't think, or it feels maybe overly written in some way. But I think that it's more of an accomplishment because I think that Into Darkness was such a complete failure of doing that this was a little bit of a reinvigoration of the idea of making it about something Star Trek-y and making it fit into that universe.
Yeah, I think the three main characters with conflicts here, Kirk, Spock, and Krall, they're not all necessarily, they don't all have the same conflict, but each of them informs the other one in their in how they resolve their own conflict. So I wouldn't say that, like, the easy way to go would be making Krall this mirror image of Kirk and having him see the darkness or blah 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 blah. But that's not really what they're doing. Kirk has his own reservations about what's going on, and he kind of works through it through the process. And it's not like Krall seeing what Krall has turned into necessarily is this dark future for Kirk or anything like that.
Right. So because Krall getting lost in space doesn't seem like it was the impetus for what happened to him. Like the seed for Krall seems to be from Balthazar Edison, and it just becomes this. You can say figuratively he's becoming the monster the more that he's isolated and just kind of hanging out by himself, thinking about it and stewing in his own juices and things like that. But Kirk is never... I don't even really understand what Kirk's want to leave is. He seems like he's bored, basically. His opening log is about like, it's kind of monotonous. Let's go to Starbase and do something else.
Yeah, excuse me. The closest I think it comes to being a one-to-one is I think that Kirk realizes that Balthazar, what's his, Edison, right?
Balthazar Edison, yeah.
Yeah, Edison was a product of a different time who was forced into this position and ultimately rails against it because of that. And I think Kirk kind of recognizes that that's not what he is. That's actively what he wants. Kirk is doing what he wants to be doing. And he kind of... Kirk is disillusioned not by Starfleet, but he's disillusioned by his place in Starfleet. And I think what Edison's journey shows him is kind of, it reaffirms for him why he's in Starfleet, what he's doing there, and where he should be going from that point. Which I think they bring it nicely in that line. He says something about saving saving a bunch of people versus living, having killed a bunch of them or something.
Yeah.
And it's like a nice tie-in to the stuff with his dad that he's stewing on at the beginning of the movie. And so I like that it's not a one-to-one, we're not so different, you and I, villain.
Yep.
But they do work together fairly nicely to solve Kirk's problem.
From my point of view, the Federation is evil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is not what it is. It's not like he's not like the Federation is evil. He's like, this thing sucks. It's not evil. I just hate it, and they did this to me, and I want to destroy them because war is the nature of people, and it's not peace or whatever.
Yes, yeah. Which is I actually really appreciate. I don't know if this was intentional, but during our TOS coverage, a big theme of TOS that no one ever really talks about is the original series hated hippies. Like it hated the 60s counterculture movement.
Yeah,
and it frequently had episodes that were Kirk stumbles onto a planet where everything... There's an episode called This Side of Paradise where Kirk stumbles into a alien world that is like idyllic. Like it is, everyone's getting along, people are living off the land, everyone's very happy, but it's all because of the influence of these plants on the planet that caused this to happen. And Kirk's counter argument is nothing should be this good for you. Like everything, like life is struggle and men are tempered in the fire of struggle. And he destroys the idyllic situation. And it's a very interesting take for TOS. And this is kind of that Edison has that point of view, and it's a nice tie back or a callback to that thing from TOS.
Yeah. I think he's just a well thought out character. Maybe like again, I think they probably could have done a little bit more with him. Because I think what is tough is
also, why is it Idris Elba? Is interesting.
Yeah, I was listening to Kevin Smith's podcast, and his co-host Mark Bernardin at the time said, "I don't know why you cast a man as beautiful as Idris Elba and then put him under 3 pounds of makeup."
Yeah, and have him talk funny. Like he's not talking like Idris Elba. He's talking like an alien. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense at all. Because even when he reverts, he's still a weird looking alien version of Edison at the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he gets like 2 lines in that captain's log where he's normal, and then all of a sudden he's like, yelling like he's on season 10 of Luther.
What's funny about that log is that he has his British accent in that. So he's speaking like he's Idris Elba, and he loses that accent somewhere along the way over the couple hundred years or whatever.
Yeah, it turns into something more alien, I guess. Yeah, I think what's interesting about these movies, I don't mean just these Star Trek movies, but these sort of like big hero, big villain movies, is the thing that you're losing in a lot of the modern ones, I think, is the middle point where the villain and the hero come together and kind of like establish their relationship with each other before breaking apart and then crashing together again at the end.
Right.
And you don't really get that here. There's no scene. I would say the stand-in for that scene in this is probably all the talking he does to Uhura.
Yes, Uhura and Sulu serve the place of Kirk in this, and at least in terms of exposing what Edison and Krall is up to.
Right, which is fine, and you got to give them something to do. But I think it comes at the sacrifice of connecting your hero and your villain at a point that comes before the end of the movie.
Right.
Like, if you look at Heat, for example, right? Heat is all about Al Pacino's character chasing down Robert De Niro's character, and then ultimately their 2 paths converge, and there's, they butt heads, shooting guns at each other. That movie doesn't really work unless you have that scene in the middle where he pulls him over and they go get a cup of coffee and talk for like 5 minutes.
Right.
And they do that in all the best versions of that story. Like they do it in Wrath of Khan. I'm sure there's many other ones that are not coming out off the top of my head. But the point is, like, you kind of need that connection with your 2 opposing viewpoints before you can really slam them together at the end and have it be satisfying. In Wrath of Khan, they're never on the same ship. They never really see each other face to face at all.
Yep.
But you do have that convergence of the characters where they do interact and they do kind of like, put each other's ethos on, put their cards on the table, so to speak.
They have a prior history too, because those characters don't meet in that movie.
Yeah, and in Heat, there's no prior relationship. They just, they kind of, they sense each other's presence. They kind of feel what's going on, and then they meet and they kind of have their, they hash out their positions, and that gives you an idea of how these characters relate to each other, which leads you into the back half of the movie, which ends with them, finally butting heads.
Yeah.
I wish that I wish that they did that in this, but like, I don't know how you would do it naturally because not having Kirk be captured, I think, is probably the right move. But I don't know how else you would really get the 2 of them together before the end of the movie.
Why would you say that Kirk not being captured is the right move? Because I could easily see this movie not changing much if Kirk was captured with the rest of the crew.
That's true. I mean, actually,
you could swap out like Sulu and Uhura for Kirk, I think. And
sure. I guess it kind of, maybe it might actually even work a little bit better. Because he's then positioned with the rest of his crew who are, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I feel like the adventure of this mission is part of what brings Kirk back into the fold, so to speak.
Kirk would not have a lot to do if he was in that position.
Yeah. So yeah. I honestly think it would be a different movie. I think it would be more like a James Bond movie where he's captured for like 45 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Chained to a table with a laser between his legs. Yeah.
And so then you'd get like Crawl scenes where he's like, come in to my conference room, sit, have some drink, let us talk. And it's like, that's not what I'm here for, guy.
Will you join me in a libation to celebrate the closure of our joint narrative or whatever?
We are not so different, you and I.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Have you ever heard Shakespeare spoken in the original Crawlese?
They bring up Shakespeare in this one. This movie's full of little it's full of little throwbacks that I don't find offensive to what the original Star Trek idea is. There's Shakespeare, it's got the music reference that we always talk about, like someone makes the joke of, is this classical music while they're listening to the Beastie Boys?
See, that's a good use. At least they're acknowledging the fact that it's ridiculous.
That it's old, yeah. And she's listening to Fight the Power, first of all. She says she likes the yelling in it, which I think is funny.
Yeah, she likes the beats and the yelling. Like, that's see, using it that way, it's actually involved in the story, and you're getting character information out of it, other than, ooh, isn't this guy cool because he listens to the Beastie Boys? You know, Scotty mentions the giant green space hand.
Yes, he does, yeah. And in a way that I can't tell if he's joking, sort of, if he's making fun of the novelty of space, or if he's actually experienced the floating green hand, but it's well done.
It's in the closing credits.
Oh, is it? I didn't notice it.
Yeah, they do. As they're zooming through space, they go past the giant green space hand. But, you know, we missed a few of those in Into Darkness, that they were tossed out very quickly, and I don't know if they registered with you, but let's put it this way. They only registered with me because I am now more steeped in Star Trek than I was the first time I saw Into Darkness. Like, Kirk, Carol Marcus makes mention of her roommate, Nurse Chapel.
Oh, she does. Interesting.
Yeah, she says, do you know who Diane Chapel or something Chapel is? And he's like, and she's like, yeah, she went off and became a nurse on this blah, blah, blah. Like,
that's a fairly good reference that I didn't pick up on. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a couple of those in Into Darkness that I think that they do fairly well. I honestly can't remember the other ones, but there's a couple of them. But yeah, they do a pretty good job in this of that stuff. None of it feels offensive. None of it feels too winky.
Yeah, it fits pretty well into the story. At least it doesn't feel distracting as to why they're talking about it. Yeah, I enjoyed this one much more than I enjoyed the other two. It's just like, for what you were talking about for the villain and hero motivation, like, it's surprising that something like Into Darkness tried to do that but didn't get it to work for them, like, because Khan is on their side somewhat for a portion of that movie, so you think that that's the time where you get to know each other and you're gonna have conversations, and then when he hijacks the Vengeance is when the difference of opinion comes out at that point, and there's kind of the change in that section of the movie. This one,
what even is, like, if you wanted to get down to that ethos argument, what is really the thing that Kirk and Khan are not on the same page about? You know what I mean? Like,
they don't have any. I would say that Khan is much more of a Bond villain, where he just wants to destroy the world, and Kirk is the only man who can stand in his way.
Yeah, there's nothing interesting. Like, again, I joked about it, but Khan's entire motivation is he just wants his kids back.
Yeah.
You know, and
the longer he doesn't get them, the angrier he gets, and is more willing to take it out on people.
It's not particularly compelling.
Yeah.
No matter how slowly and deeply Benedict Cumberbatch says his lines.
Idris Elba should have done a impersonation of that to do an homage to the prior performances before him. Crawl is not that way, and I think Crawl works. Crawl is definitely the best of the villains of the Kelvin movies.
Yeah,
I think,
I agree.
even if he is kind of underwhelming towards the end, because I do think they could have fleshed out the aspect of what his history is. The aspect of what his history is comes off as more of an Easter eggy fan throw out to people, like the fact that he exists during the Romulan Wars and the Xindi War and stuff like that is explicit references to Enterprise, and that it feels like you're just throwing in a, not fan service, but you're just trying to link him to something at that point, and it's not really character work as much as saying this character came from this point of view or this era of the franchise and everything like that.
I don't know, because I honestly didn't. The first time I saw it, I didn't put together that those were specifically Enterprise references.
Yep.
And I think it works in the favor. Sure, they're definitely there for that purpose, but I think they're also there in service of what he is as a character.
Yeah, he's from a violent wartime, basically.
Yeah, and he's someone who existed before the Federation and tried to adapt to the Federation and couldn't do it.
I think maybe that's fundamentally the weakest part of him, is that it's kind of just a leap in logic to go like, oh yeah, he's a soldier, he just couldn't fit in after that. Like he doesn't have a specifically good story as to why Unity doesn't work for him. You know,
sure.
he doesn't have an example of how the Federation is failing. He's just like, I liked it back in the old days, and I want to go back to the old days.
To be fair, I think that's kind of by design. I don't think that he has been sitting there for 200 years or whatever, writing his thesis about why the Federation is bad policy.
Yeah,
I think it's more that he has, he's forgotten who he is, and he's part of something he doesn't want to be a part of and probably doesn't really think is going to work. It ends up proving him right by getting his crew stranded and everybody dying. And so he's there basically stewing in his own anger for 200 years or however long it is, as he regresses or turns into this alien driven by just gut anger and not really revenge, but anger.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that he needs
he's not very intellectual.
I don't think he needs like a debate team retort to the concept of the Federation. Because I think he's taking his core, what his core problems are, and they're just amplifying themselves after being stewed in for so long.
Yes, and I think the movie as it's constructed doesn't really need him to do anything that. I view it as something of a villain weakness, just in the sense that his actions seem a little bit divorced from his actions. Just seem sort of like the movie villain must hate the Federation. This is why he hates the Federation. And you don't really have time to stew on that or anything. There's action sequences to go through. I don't think he particularly suffers very much as a character, but if you were to move it in a more Star Trek-y direction, where he and Kirk interacted with each other, I think you need that at that point. If they had spent more time together, I would have been less understanding of his I just don't like the Federation viewpoint.
Right, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that is the byproduct of the way that they have it set up, is that if they do get more time together, you do need to flesh out what his actual problem is.
It's just a scene of Kirk's going, that's it? He's like, yeah, just don't like the Federation. He's like, really? They didn't screw you over? And he's like, no, just I don't like their ideology. I don't like the bundle of sticks metaphor at all.
Yeah, and Kirk is just like, I mean, it's pretty good, right?
We can fix your disease here. We can go.
Yeah, have you seen the Yorktown? It's pretty amazing.
Can we talk about the Yorktown? Actually, the Yorktown's a great Star Trek set, and that's going to.
Oh, it looks great. Yeah,
I'm going to. We've talked before about Star Trek. Sometimes has to pay special attention, I feel, to not looking like a Star Wars movie. I think it's very important that they have a distinct look from Star Wars. I think visually, this movie really excels at that. This looks like a updated TOS 60s set to me in all the right ways. And the Yorktown feels appropriate. Like that feels like a Star Trek thing that wouldn't really work in Star Wars for some reason. And just the sets of the alien planet, the sets of people hanging out in the Yorktown or whatever. It all really works, and I think it looks distinct from Star Wars, but it looks updated, and I think it's important that Star Trek maintains a distinctiveness from Star Wars. I think it's easy to, because Star Wars is so in the zeitgeist, it's easy to unintentionally copy their aesthetic in a lot of ways, definitely. And I think they avoid it here pretty well. Yeah,
I think so too. And I think what's interesting about this one that they don't do in the last two is the one of the key differences between Star Trek and Star Wars is Star Trek has star bases. Star Wars does not generally have that, except
just
for
Death Star.
The Death Star and Star Killer base, but that's a planet. It's not. It doesn't move or anything.
Right.
It's not. I mean, I guess it's man-made, but it's not. It doesn't count. It doesn't have. The Deep Space Nine type base, and playing that up, I think was great, because planet to planet is whatever, but the idea in Star Trek is that you're not necessarily near a planet, because you are out there trekking amongst the stars, so to speak.
Yep.
And so having the star base is great, and the design, that's definitely not a Star Wars design. You would not see that in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's cool. Just the sort of interlocking rings where it's city on both sides of the ring, so there's no up or down in it because you're in space at that point.
Yeah, whatever the gravity is relative to wherever you are at the time.
Yeah, and they insultingly call it a snow globe and stuff. It does look like a snow globe, but it's cool. And I even like the visual sequence. I think all of the shots in this are just better than what Abrams does. Like everything is more interesting when the Enterprise enters the starbase and everything. When characters are just walking down the hallway, even when the ship gets attacked and it starts losing gravity, which is something it did in both of the prior movies. I think it looks better here for some reason. It's interesting.
The camera is not constantly moving in this movie.
Right. Yeah.
You know, the smaller scenes get smaller camera. And I think it actually stands out, having watched all three of them back to back, how much different this movie is visually than the first two, because they're not doing the lens flare thing, which I don't think the lens flares are bad. Maybe they went overboard and into darkness. I don't know. But I think that the visuals are just so much clearer in this movie, and the makeup. Oh my God, the makeup is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Jayla's makeup is awesome. Even those like little side goons that she beats up when she meets Scotty, their makeup is fantastic.
Who are those guys?
Makeup is great. I don't know. They're just other people who are on the planet.
Okay.
Krall's makeup is great. Both of his henchmen, the girl and the guy, their makeup is great. The girl with the face hugger head thing is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just all really, really well done. The design is great. The execution is great. In a way that it feels a lot more of a piece here than it does in the first two. The first two, some of that stuff feels a little throwaway.
Yes.
But here it all feels like it's considered equally.
I think the sign of sort of bad directing, or maybe good directing, I think hides intention well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't go, oh, he's moving the camera because he thinks it looks cool. And it's like there's no good direction kind of hides why you're doing something in a lot of ways. And I think that Abrams is pretty unsubtle with how he likes to have things framed and look. And the spectacle, I guess, is bigger. But I think that what's funny is that coming from a Fast and the Furious guy, you'd think it would be the other way around, but it's really not. He's actually more reserved than Abrams is.
Yeah, I think another big difference between Star Trek and Star Wars that gets muddled in these movies, and they remember it in this one, is that Star Wars is generally about movement. It's a lot. Once things get rolling in Star Wars, they tend not to stop unless, I guess Empire Strikes Back, they kind of, slow down a bit. But still, even when you've got Luke on Dagobah training with Yoda, your other story is a chase story where they're trying to chase down Han and Leia on the Falcon and stuff. It's a very active, very forward-moving movie, which is, one of the reasons why when they do a flashback in The Last Jedi, I found it so jarring. Because Star Wars is not about dwelling on the past and like revisiting that visually. It's all forward momentum. Star Trek is a lot more, and even traveling in Star Wars, planet to planet, who knows how long it takes to get anywhere. It's, you hit your hyperdrive and, you go to your map screen, you pick your waypoint, and then you show up there.
Put a little chyron in the bottom left of the screen so that people know where you are at this point.
Yeah. Star Trek has always been a lot more about space and about the vastness of space and in some cases the monotony of space or the loneliness of space.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lot more about being still in space than Star Wars is.
Getting stuck in places is a big part of Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 90% of Star Trek is people being stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think in these movies, the first two very much operate in that Star Wars sensibility where everything is constantly moving. The camera's constantly moving. People are constantly moving. Even quiet scenes, the camera's moving around or it's shaking or something. So you don't get any of that consideration of stillness and space that Star Trek brings to the table.
Yeah.
This movie you do. like that opening captain's log sequence with Kirk is amazing. I think that's the best Star Trek thing, full stop, in all three of these movies, because you get a sense of where they are, how he's feeling about stuff. You get a sense of the crew of the ship, which in turn makes you feel that much worse when the place gets destroyed 20 minutes later and people start getting sucked out into space. And like they managed to very quickly put faces to the rest of the crew, so when they start killing them, you feel bad about it, instead of them just for later in the movie, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and as they fly the Franklin out after they crash and crawl, life sucks someone to turn him back into Idris Elba. We were both like, who did he life suck? Yeah. And then at that point she went, oh my God, I forgot there was like 40 other people on the ship. Because you don't see them. Right. When once the survivors, they beam in. Yeah. Yeah. Once they start the escape, those survivors, the rest of the crew, you don't see them again. Yes. Yep. But in the first half of the movie, you see them a lot. And the captain's log itself is a very, just in concept, is a very, is like sort of ruminating on the situation they are currently in. It's never like the crawl of Star Wars where it's like, this is what's going on, this is what you need to know so you can dive into this battle. It's always, the captain's log is always, here's the situation, we're going to bring you into it at a fairly boring point in the situation. Yeah. It's never captain's log, stardate, blah, 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 blah. The Enterprise has been flying through Klingon space into the neutral zone for 5 days, and that's how it is. Hard cut to Romulans like flanking you, blasting the shit out of your ship. Yeah, the captain's log captain's log is never war. Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's never the dead speak. So, and I think this movie does a great job of reintroducing the Star Trekkiness to Star Trek. Yeah, I'd agree. And off of the opening scene, what I think it really does well in terms of Star Trek is that it takes a different angle on what you accept as this is what Star Trek TOS is like. Like they're on their 5-year mission, but the original series never got into how fucking boring a lot of it must have been, who's having sex in the crew, like how are sexual relationships being managed, like what's Kirk's mindset when he's not chasing someone with a phaser or like sliding down a mountain, like he's doing a lot of science ostensibly, and he's doing a lot of diplomacy and things like that. Not really Kirk's strong suit. What does he think about when he's not doing things that are action based and things like that? It feels completely within character of what TOS's sort of outlook was, while also going somewhere different with it. And if I think I have a big problem across all of the Kelvin movies, including this one, I really don't like what they did with Spock in a lot of ways. I think they made him emotional for no good reason, really. Yeah. Like there's no real examination of what this means. I think he's inconsistent across the 3 movies, and I also think that he's surprisingly unimportant in the movies too. Like he for as much as they put him up front, he kind of is. Yeah. He never really has I don't think there's a single great Kirk and Spock scene in any of these movies. Yeah, they're all kind of awkward. Like I think it's part of it is you don't really get a lot of time with them at all. Yeah. But in this one, the main Spock and Kirk sequence is when they're both on the elevator together and they're not really talking because it's awkward. Right. The joke I did like of this one was when Spock reveals that they can find where they are because of Uhura's necklace. And it's like, you gave her a tracking device. Yeah. That was not intentional, but yeah, it's clever. But I think that, I think Spock is overly, like, the scene that really stuck out for me was, I did not like when Bones pulls out the piece that's stuck in Spock, right? And Spock screams in pain. That's not how I'd play that character. Like, if you want to show severe pain in Spock, he grimaces or something. Like breaking him just to show enough of breaking him to show any discomfort is enough to show how much Spock is in pain. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. Yeah. They definitely made a choice with the revamp of this to make Spock a more emotional character, which kind of, You know, it's weird because I don't think I picked up on this watching the movies previously, but having watched them all so close together, it's more weird in these movies when Spock does Spock stuff.
Yeah.
Like when because like we said in the last one, they seem to make him kind of more robotic in the last one, at least for the beginning of the movie anyway. And it feels weird because this character that they've created is by his nature more emotional than the original Spock. So when you try within that setup to try to have him be more like Spock, original Spock, it feels weird. So when you have him saying stuff like, you know, the horse shit line where he's like, I don't understand what excrement of any kind has to do with the situation. Like that's a Data line.
It is a
that's
Data
not
line.
a Spock line. And it feels weird having him do that robotic stuff when you also in the same movie, arguably in this case in the same scene, have him doing something very un-Spock-like as far as, you know, crying or yelling out in pain because they're pulling this thing out of him or whatever.
Or laughing. I think they screw up the scene where he starts laughing and they play it for a joke where McCoy goes, oh, he's going delirious at this point. That's, to me, that works. Like if Spock actually starts showing emotion because he's losing his grip on things or he's dying, that feels realistic, but they play that as a joke mostly, where McCoy is like, oh, he's laughing, that's funny. Oh, wait, it must mean something else.
Yeah. Like, I think that works better if your Spock is not quite as emotional as he is in the, and you know, I think it's taste at this point, right? Because it's like I said, they made a conscious choice to make Spock a more emotional character. That's just what they did.
Yeah, but without a goal, I would say. Like they weren't sure why they wanted to do that, and then no movie was able to really answer why they should be doing it.
And he never addresses it really. Like they never make it a struggle for him in either direction after the first movie. Like, well, I guess the second one they kind of do, but because that's sort of his thing about why he doesn't show emotion.
Yeah, it's his arc, but it doesn't feel like it's like...
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it, yeah.
Who cares, yeah.
But yeah, like there's no... Yeah, he doesn't have a lot to do in this movie.
No, it's too bad. I think you're right about him being basically portrayed as Data. And I think that like the reason Nimoy was so great at playing Spock, and because the writing, they didn't play them like the lack of emotion does not make you an idiot in social circumstances.
Right.
Like that's what Data's thing is, because Data doesn't understand interaction on that level. Spock is aware of emotional trauma that he can cause to people. Him saying, it's not that he would be like inconsiderate or ignorant of what he's saying and how it hurts people. He would just, his outlook on it would be, this is the way I am, this is the way we choose to be, therefore I'm going to tell you the truth in this situation, and I know what the consequences are going to be from it.
Yeah, Spock gets jokes.
Yes.
You know,
he doesn't laugh.
He doesn't laugh. He gets them, and he understands, vulgar parlance. He just doesn't use it. You know, it's not like he's never experienced humans talking to him before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's I think part of it most likely is that much like Kirk being this horned up thin character who's only there to punch and screw people, the public understanding of Spock is basically more Data-like.
Yep.
And so in creating these movies and these new characters, I think giving Spock more emotion was probably based in this idea where it's like, well, you know, a character with no emotion is just, it's not really fun to act. It's not really...
it's inert. How can you generate any drama with this character who doesn't emote things? Yeah.
Right. So, you know, we need to create this struggle between both sides of his character in order to create this, you know, a great actor could really sink their teeth into this role. And I think a great actor did sink his teeth into this role, and his name was Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
He managed to, like, I wouldn't look at any Nimoy Spock performance and say that he's a bad actor or this character is not worth doing because he's not
limited. He's not limited in some way.
He's not limited because all of that stuff is so internal, and you can see that. Like the best Spock stuff, you can see all of the emotions that he's going through, even if he's not, you know, visibly weeping on screen.
And also, I think
like
that
you get more from a Nimoy Spock scene with Sarek where he like pauses an extra long time before he says his lines than anything you get from this Spock where he's like, you know, screaming and waving his fists in the air.
The Spock Sarek scene at the end of Voyage Home is still my favorite written Star Trek scene of all time because in the script, they are talking to each other like Vulcans. They're just saying, "How are you? Good to be back. How is Mother?" All this stuff. But the two actors who are the two best Vulcans that have ever played any of the Vulcan roles.
Well, they originated the concept.
And no one seems to be able to imitate them or like to take what they were putting down. But the conversation is just loaded with the subtext of, as you're saying, how they're pausing, how they're looking at each other. Like it's all nonverbal between the two of them that portrays how they actually feel. And it's just much better than weeping-eyed Spock in these movies,
And that appeals to you as a emotionally distant father.
Exactly. I can just shut down and just say, "How are you? How's Mother? Good to see you. Goodbye." Don't even shake hands. Just say goodbye.
No eye contact.
Was that I think that was all and just my final point on the Spock thing is that it also kind of doesn't show terrific, or maybe it's hard in this movie, but terrific understanding of why the trifecta of Kirk, McCoy, and Spock are important. Because when Spock cannot emote or make the emotional argument, that's what McCoy is there for.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
They become a fuller character by interacting with each other.
Yeah. And I think the biggest failing of these three movies, character-wise, is they never establish those three as like a unit.
Yes.
I think they... Like in this one, this is the movie where you would really be able to do that, and they don't do it. They establish Kirk and Bones pretty well across these three movies as, you know, what their relationship is, and they're clearly friends and how they talk to each other and stuff. But Spock never feels like he's part of that group, and he never really feels like... I don't feel like the Kirk of these movies is going to Spock for help or
no,
for
he's
advice.
Certainly. I was surprised that Kirk nominates him to replace him as captain. It's like, really, Spock? Like you don't seem to really like the guy.
Yeah, they just don't have any time together to build their relationship, because in the first two movies, the first movie they're at odds, the second movie they're at odds, but when they're not at odds, they, you know, Kirk's dead.
Yeah,
they just don't have any time to really build them as characters, but Bones serves the purpose that every time you dip in with him and Kirk, you feel like that they are friends and confidants.
Yes. We get better chemistry between those two. I don't know what it is. It might fundamentally come down to the Spock performance about what they were doing. I think the script is more important because they are limited in the amount of time that they spend with each other. It is too bad.
And it's tough too, because you have to kind of pick your battles, I guess, is like what you want to do with your movie. I think this is successful because, you know, as I was saying, it focuses more on like the vastness and the stillness of space, but that doesn't mean that it's boring. There's a lot of action in this movie. I think because you're only working on 3 movies as opposed to an entire history of television, if you're gonna make a movie about the relationship of Spock and Kirk, you kind of have to make a movie about the relationship of Spock and Kirk.
Yeah.
They don't do that here.
I think the biggest rock around the neck is Into Darkness. I think Into Darkness was a big misstep in what they decided to do there. That should have been the Spock and Kirk building movie, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
It's too bad, because you could, if Into Darkness was about building the trifecta of those 3, this movie makes sense where it is then, because then you can split them apart again, and their sort of characterizations can go off with the other characters and make sense.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, and what happens in Into Darkness, I think, could have been...
They were trying to copy. They were just so obviously trying to get the dark second movie, like the Empire movie out of it. And
it's
just
literally called Into Darkness.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they very easily could have focused on the relationship of the trifecta there, and even within the same movie, probably had a more satisfying story, but they didn't.
Yeah.
My question...
The argument there is about... Khan. You have to modernize the argument about Khan at that point, where it's those three butting heads about what the best way to deal with this guy is.
Yeah, like there's no point where you have the three of them in a conference room and Bones is like, this guy's insane. He's a monster. He's a medical freak. There's no way we can trust him. And Spock is like, well, I mean, logically, his strength, we do have what he wants, and logically he would be able to work with us, and his strength is an asset. Like,
yeah, we need him. He's the best of us. It's logical to use him.
Yeah, like even a scene like that would really have done a lot. Yeah. My question is, what does this... it seems more and more unlikely that we're going to get another one.
Yeah.
I hope that we do, because I think that the number one thing that I've pulled from watching these is that there's so much potential here. And I feel like this movie comes the closest to realizing that potential, but even then, it's kind of too little too late for the franchise.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think the future of theatrical Star Trek is? Do you think there is a future, or do you think it's going to be just, now that streaming is a thing, that's where Star Trek lives?
I think they could do movies. I mean, on a technical level, the movie side and the TV side have been combined under the parent company again.
Right.
So there's not that friction there about what they can and can't do between the two of them. Because who's the Fargo? Noah Cawley, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's doing the next one, and I think he said he's not sure if he's using the Kelvin universe in it.
Really?
Yeah. So he would... And I think he was also unsure. This is, it sounds like he's coming up with an idea that he's going to pitch, and they're going to go, no, you have to use characters that people are familiar with.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with it. But I think he seemed like in the interview, he was inclined in towards creating a brand new crew for his movie.
Interesting. Like a brand new ship and brand new crew,
ship and
like,
everything. Yeah.
Really?
So it wouldn't be related. It wouldn't be pre-existing canon. It could win Best Original Screenplay. Oh, maybe not, because Star Trek is in the title.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm still somewhat concerned about whether or not Star Trek works to its fullest as a movie set at this point. Yeah. And honestly, the biggest weakness, I think, from we opened this talking about how there's only 3 of these, is that Star Trek is so dependent on getting to know the relationships that if you're limited in a movie, it will never really feel like it's a Star Trek thing.
Yeah. This one, I mean, actually, all 3 of them, it feels like there's a lot. It almost feels like these movies existed at the end of seasons of television, and that we just never got to see the episodes.
Yeah, because all that stuff happens in between the movies, sort of.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see what happens. I love Star Trek movies. I really enjoy when Star Trek gets a big budget. But arguably, I mean, if you look at Discovery, it's not like they're doing anything on Discovery that's less than what they would do in a movie at this point.
Yeah.
You know, visually, it all looks pretty good.
I do feel that I do have kind of a special thing where the movies do feel like the end of a series, and it's a way to like take the series and then you do something that you could never do in the series, and you can change things up a little bit. The TOS movies certainly feel that way in how they approach like the concept of aging. Overall, 6 of them, it feels like, and then the TNG movies kind of feel like they never really knew what they wanted to do, so they're all very different from each other, and that's kind of interesting. I just don't know if I would create a movie set and be as invested in it without it having some kind of season of TV backing in front of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And as far as like a wholly original movie, I think that's a tough sell.
It is. That's very hard.
Like, yeah. Cause I mean, they couldn't get people to come see a movie featuring characters they did know.
Yes.
You know, it just selling, at that point, why even call it Star Trek? You know, because I think that's part of it too. Is I enjoy seeing things I recognize. I enjoy seeing characters I recognize.
Yeah.
And the movies are usually where that happens. Like you can go off and do shit on Deep Space Nine that I don't know anything about, but I can also go to the movies and see the TNG crew fighting the Borg or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Because as much as we kind of shit on canon, not shit on it, but we don't view it as ultimately all that important. It is important that the movies feel of the universe. And not to say that if you started off in a new cast, it would feel totally disconnected, because you could obviously reference prior stuff, but it does feel like the baby steps you can take away from what people know are just baby steps before it's too far removed and then no one cares about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's all I have to say about this one. Did you have anything else you wanted to say? Or should we just start the wrap-up process? And we can give kind of, well, I guess we've done final thoughts about the trilogy as a whole, but I mean, I think that Beyond is a top 4 Star Trek movie for me.
Yeah, I agree.
And ahead of it would be Voyage, Wrath of Khan, and maybe First Contact. This could maybe knock First Contact out of spot 3 for me.
Really?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's weird because well, we'll see. I never owned this on DVD or anything before, so I watched 2009 a lot more. And I said during that show that I would put 2009 in probably my top 4 or even top 3. I think this is probably right on the heels of that one. I think this is a better movie than 2009, but for some reason I find myself gravitating towards 2009 as something I go back to watch more frequently.
Yeah, that's always surprising to me. I find it so I've almost completely forgotten what 2009 is about on some level.
I don't know why it is. And it's not, you know, I think it was because at the time it was this big return to Star Trek, and it was the only other Star Trek thing I was watching. So I kind of have a bit of a soft spot for it.
Yeah, just a distinct memory of it.
Yeah, and I do like the style of it. I do think it's fairly inventive as how it reinvented things. But I do think this is the best movie, just as far as Star Trek movie in this trilogy. This is definitely the best one.
What happened to you out there, Edison?
Edison. I have to say, Kirk, I've missed being me. We lost ourselves, but gained a purpose. A means to bring the galaxy back to the struggle that made humanity strong.
I think you underestimate humanity.
I fought for humanity! Lost millions to the Zinti and Romulan wars. And for what? For the Federation to sit me in the captain's chair and break bread with the enemy.
We change. We have to. We spend the rest of our lives fighting the same battles.
I'll put up, I'll recalibrate my rankings and I'm not going to do it now, but I'll put it up on the website and people can look at it there. So go to the Penske file.
We didn't even mention the picture of the TOS movie crew.
Oh, yeah.
Is in
very much confused Amy. We had to have a 5-minute conversation about what she's like, is that a picture of him? Like, why does he look so different? Like, what a terrible insertion to have the original cast picture just replace these new actors. Like, no, this is a timeline split, and then her eyes glazed over at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice, you have to do that.
You do.
With that situation, yeah.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it too. Nimoy died before this, right? He must have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Nimoy and
Yelchin died before it came out, obviously, but he was in it. Yeah.
Which is, man, that's still so very strange.
Yeah. Just a weird freak death of getting like a car running over yourself, which is just, bizarre that it would actually happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so go to thepenskypodcast.com and I'll have the ratings for the movies. I'll re-rank the movies after I think about it. I won't have time to do it now and say it on the air, but you can go there, check that out if you're so interested. I think that's it. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you very much. You can join or support the show. Patreon.com/thepenskyfile. It's the best way to do it. $2 a month gets you extra stuff and extra podcasts, extra videos, extra live streams, things like that every once in a while. Special thanks go to the Captain tier. Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Captain Court Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Michaels, Christian Pouch, Darth Moss, David Beardmore, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, HH28, Yarpy, Jeffrey Koch, Joint Mango, Jordan Cooper, Kevin Reyes, Kyle Barrett, Matt Corrier, Matt Cutler, Matt Ross, Meg Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elledge, Samuel Custer, Grim Santos, Sean Spinobi, Tark Latif, Tom Hiles, Vault 13 Hero, and Will Yates. Thank you very much, guys, for supporting the show. Whew, we're done. Social media, all down below. Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. I'm going through 30 days of DS9 on the social media. You guys can follow me there. I think I'm up to day, whatever it is now, 20 on that, so we're almost done, but you can go back and check them out. And I think that's pretty much it. Clay, do you have anything you want to say? Any new podcasts coming out?
You can check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show with me and Amanda, who joined us on the Wes Craven episodes of Real Ripe and Real Rotten, where we cover the movies off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. And I don't know when this is coming out, but we should have at least one episode out by this point.
Yes, The Shining is out now. So if you guys are interested in hearing Clay and Amanda talk about horror movies, you can check out The Shining. Just go to thepenskyfile.com, penskyfile.com, thepenskyfile.com. And there was something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, just we're doing the Oscars for Real Ripe and Real Rotten. So we've recorded Parasite, and that'll be out soon if it's not out already. And then we have the Joker coming out after that, and then we'll do a B-roll. So we're doing the Best Picture nominees, the highest and the lowest rated. Highest was Parasite, lowest was Joker.
It's really interesting to me because I wouldn't have guessed that, well, yeah, maybe I would have, but I wouldn't have guessed that Joker was the lowest, but Joker definitely feels like more of a B-roll movie. To me.
Yes.
Where it's like, it's good, but it's not like the one that I would go to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm interested in talk. I mean, the Joker is really just interesting to me because we had like a full-blown moral panic before that movie came out. People were like, you cannot show a movie like this. And then it came out and no one gave a fuck. And it's like, what a ridiculous situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, we can get into that when we'll
get into it. So if you guys are interested in Joker, you can follow that at the.
But not too interested, because that's where the problems start.
Probably go out and have sex. You fucking incels.
In the Joker.
I think that's it, guys. We're done with the Kelvin movies. They were barely here, and now they're gone. But hopefully you enjoyed the coverage. We're starting Picard. I guess that's a good place to wrap this up. Picard will start this week. We'll be doing that on Friday. The podcast will probably come out later Friday because Picard airs on Thursday night, so we'll be recording on Friday. I'll try to get the podcasts out as soon as possible, so you can look forward to those coming out on Fridays going forward. So Picard stuff will be on Friday.
I'm looking forward to seeing those new uniforms, those new pins.
Did you watch the video of Sirach Lofton giving his embargo-breaking review of it?
No, I saw the cliff notes of it, but I didn't watch it.
Yeah. It's interesting. We'll see.
A lot of costume talk.
There wasn't a tremendous amount of costume talk. They were being extremely vague because it's basically a video that's trying to capitalize on being out there without being able to actually say anything about it.
Right.
But it sounds to me it has Discovery's writing problems, it seems, but it's also slower at the same time. So we'll see. Because none of them were particularly enamored with the writing at this point. But it also sounds through 3 episodes that Picard is not in space yet.
Oh, all right.
So cool. We'll see. All right, guys, Picard starts this week. You can check it out. This will come out the day Picard comes out tonight, actually, because this podcast will come out on Thursday. So Picard is out tonight. Enjoy it. We'll be back tomorrow with a podcast about it. And I think that's it. All right. See you later.